Well, as Democrats move closer to voting Vice President Kamala Harris as their presidential nominee, now a New York Post editorial is warning former President Trump and Senator J.D. Vance that they need to woo women voters to win, saying, quote, both Trump and Vance need to keep on the straight and narrow to avoid alienating female voters who might otherwise agree with them on policy. And, quote, maybe Trump should start by quitting hurling derogatory nicknames and ad hominem insults at his foes. Joining us now over the phone, we've got author and journalist Bill O'Reilly, whose best-selling books include The United States of Trump. Bill, good morning to you.
Hey, Brooke, thanks for having me in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. This New York Post article, do you think it's accurate in urging the former president to sort of shift his strategy? How crucial are women going to be in November?
Well, there are more registered women voters than men, and in the previous two presidential votes, Donald Trump has lost to women. So obviously, they're crucial to him. And the New York Post wants Trump to win, so they are advising him not to insult Kamala Harris in a personal way, which I think is good advice. I mean, Trump doesn't really get any votes by calling his opponent dumb as a rock. I mean, why bother, right? So whether Donald Trump will take that advice or not, nobody knows, because he pretty much does what he wants to do.
J.D. Vance has caught a lot of flack recently about his comments on childless cat ladies. You know, he argues that the media is twisting his words, but still he's sort of doubled down. The former president in an interview even recently said about women, I think they understand it. What do you make of their handling of this? I mean, are these two candidates the right people to be bringing women voters?
Well, it's up to the Republican Party. I mean, I don't have any beef with the platform. If Senator Vance wants to clarify his statements, he should go on the air with you and me or whoever and clarify them. This happened 3 years ago where he made these statements. He was at a rally, and this is what always happens. The people at the rally are encouraging statements about things they don't like, and then politicians then dive into these statements with remarks they feel are sarcastic or humorous, and then they're taken as literal. So, but if Vance wants to help the ticket, he needs to get out there and start to answer questions from journalists. I think that would be step number one.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, though, his sort of doubling down on those comments, considering the heat that he's getting in the press and the headlines.
What's the double down, Brooke? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Well, he's been saying that the media is twisting his words, the former president saying, you know, I think women understand that.
You know, the media twists words all the time. I mean, that's not doubling down. I think what his point is, and again, I'm not in business to be sticking up for J.D. Vance, but I think his point is that he was addressing a liberal strain of voters and saying they didn't like traditional families. I think that's what it was, but I don't know, and it's up to Vance to clarify it.
The Trump team, what do they have to do to woo women voters?
I think that the big thing about Kamala Harris is her extremism in certain areas. So American women are not stupid. I mean, they will vote gender sometimes, but as we saw with Hillary Clinton, that's not the defining moment. But Vice President Harris has put herself up as the abortion warrior. However, her stance is so extreme that the Trump campaign has a real opportunity to define it. Did you know, Brooke, that Kamala Harris supports abortion late term for any reason at any time up to birth? There are only 3 countries in the world, non-communist countries, that have that. Only 3, Canada, Holland, and Singapore. That is an extreme position that Kamala Harris has taken. If the Trump campaign goes in with precision to define not only that, but other extreme positions, I think they'll win over some women.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.